unlocked the secrets of the universe, explained gravity, but spent half his life trying to turn lead into gold? He even jammed a blunt needle directly into his own eye socket just to see what would happen. That's right, forget the boring math nerd label. And that famous story about the apple hitting his head? A complete lie. The real father of modern physics, Sir Isaac Newton, was actually an occult-obsessed alchemist who was incredibly petty and held grudges to the grave. Inventing calculus out of pure spite? Hunting down counterfeiters like a 17th century Batman? Let's dive into the gloriously chaotic life of history's ultimate academic weapon. Welcome back to BrainBoost English Podcast, where we learn English by digging up the crazy, unfiltered stories from history. If you think history is just a bunch of dusty dates and boring dudes in wigs, you are in the right place to have your mind blown. Grab your tea, get comfortable, and let us travel back in time. Let us rewind the clock back to Christmas Day, 1642. We are in a tiny, freezing rural village called Woolsthorpe in England. A baby is born prematurely. And when I say small, I mean incredibly tiny. His mother actually said he could fit inside a quart mug. Basically, he was the size of a large cup of coffee. His father had passed away before he was even born. And things did not get much better from there. When little Isaac was just 3 years old, his mother decided to remarry. But her new husband, a wealthy clergyman, did not want a stepson around the house. So, what did she do? She left Isaac behind with his grandmother and moved away to start an entirely new family. Ouch. Talk about some serious childhood trauma. This deep sense of abandonment became the perfect recipe for creating a genius. But it also created a man who was incredibly isolated, deeply insecure, and held onto anger like it was an Olympic sport. Growing up without his parents, Isaac spent most of his time alone. He was not out playing tag or throwing rocks with the other village boys. Instead, he was building tiny, complex mechanical toys, wooden clocks, and miniature windmills. He was a quiet observer of the world, but boiling underneath that quiet exterior was a desperate need to prove his worth. Fast forward a bit. Young Isaac goes to school. He is a quiet, sickly kid, completely uninterested in socializing. Naturally, this makes him a prime target for the local school bullies. One day, a bigger, stronger kid kicks him right in the stomach on the way to class. Now, a normal kid might cry, tell a teacher, or maybe try to throw a punch back, but Isaac Newton was not normal. He did fight back physically, but he realized he could never win with his fists. Instead, he decided to destroy this bully in the most brutal way possible for a nerd. He was going to completely humiliate him academically. Isaac studied like a madman. He worked day and night, absorbing every book he could get his hands on. He climbed to the absolute top of the class, looking down on his tormentor from the peak of academic supremacy. This single event set the tone for his entire life. Newton's biggest motivation was not necessarily saving the world, spreading knowledge, or helping humanity. It was proving that everyone else was an idiot and that he was the smartest person in any room. Now we hit the year 1665. Isaac is a university student at Cambridge, but disaster strikes. The Great Plague sweeps across London, forcing the entire university to shut down to prevent the spread of the disease. Everyone is sent home to quarantine. Does that sound familiar? While most of us spent our recent pandemic quarantines binge-watching TV shows, making iced coffee, and scrolling through social media, 23-year-old Isaac went back to his family farm and casually revolutionized human understanding. This period is known by historians as his Year of Wonders. Sitting in his garden, completely isolated from society, he supposedly saw an apple fall from a tree. Spoiler alert, it probably did not hit him directly on the head like the cartoons show, but seeing it fall did make him wonder why things always fall straight down towards the center of the earth. Why do they not fall sideways or upwards? Boom! The concept of universal gravity is born. But he did not stop there. He was looking at complex physics problems and realized that the math of his time was simply not good enough to solve them. Standard algebra and geometry were too basic for a mind like his. So, because he was annoyed by this limitation, he decided to invent an entirely new branch of mathematics just to help him do his homework. Yes, he invented calculus. Imagine being so frustrated by a math problem that you literally invent a new type of math to fix it. During this same quarantine, he also played around with optics, proving that white light is actually made up of a rainbow of different colors. How did he do this? Well, this is where things get a little unhinged. To understand how the human eye perceives light, he stared directly at the blinding sun for as long as he could physically stand it. When that was not enough, he took a bodkin, which is essentially a large, blunt sewing needle, and slid it right between his eyeball and his eye socket. He pushed it all the way to the back of his eye and pressed on the nerve just to see what kind of colored circles would pop up in his vision. Do not ever try this at home, folks. He was literally poking his own visual system to see how light worked. He survived, thankfully, with his vision mostly intact, but it goes to show just how obsessed he was with finding the truth. But here is the most ridiculous part of this whole quarantine productivity session. Newton made all these massive, world-changing discoveries, and then he just shoved his notes in a drawer. He hid them away for decades. Why would anyone do that? Because he was absolutely terrified of criticism. He hated the idea of anyone looking at his work and finding a flaw, or worse, disagreeing with him. He was a once-in-a-generation genius, but his skin was paper thin. Little did he know, hiding his monumental work would eventually lead to the greatest intellectual fistfight in scientific history. A bitter war of words and giant egos with a man named Robert Hooke, a fellow scientist who was just as brilliant and just as petty as Newton himself. Hooke was loud, proud, and completely unbothered by stepping on toes. When Newton finally shared a tiny piece of his work, Hooke immediately claimed that he had already thought of it first. This rivalry would push Newton to the absolute edge of his sanity. It would force him out of hiding and drive him to write the greatest scientific book ever published, purely out of spite to crush his rival. But before we get into that epic scientific showdown, the secret underground alchemy labs, and Newton's bizarre transition into a merciless bounty hunter who chased down criminals in the dark alleys of London, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to BrainBoost English Podcast, because things in Newton's life are about to get incredibly toxic, and you definitely do not want to miss what happens next. So, let us jump right back into the drama. It is the 1680s, and the scientific community in London is buzzing with a massive debate. Why do planets orbit the sun in an elliptical shape? Everyone was scratching their heads. A brilliant astronomer named Edmund Halley, yes, the guy who has that famous comet named after him, decided to take a trip to Cambridge to ask the one man he thought might have the answer. He knocks on Isaac Newton's door and poses the question. Newton, without missing a beat, casually replies that he already solved that problem years ago. He just lost the papers somewhere in his messy room. Halley is absolutely stunned. He practically begs Newton to rewrite his findings. This simple request from Halley sparked something inside Newton, but what really fueled the fire was Robert Hooke. You see, Hooke was back in London telling anyone who would listen that he was on the verge of solving the planetary orbit problem himself. When Newton heard that Hooke was trying to steal the spotlight, something inside him snapped. Newton locked himself in his room for 18 months. He barely ate, he barely slept, and he certainly did not socialize. He was fueled by an unholy mixture of pure genius and absolute, unfiltered spite. The result was a book called Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy, better known as the Principia. It is widely considered the most important scientific book ever written. It laid down the laws of motion and universal gravitation. He literally handed humanity the instruction manual for the universe. But when the book was about to be published, Hooke demanded that he be given credit in the preface for inspiring Newton. Oh boy, did he poke the wrong bear. Newton went completely ballistic. He went through his manuscript and aggressively deleted almost every single mention of Hooke's name. He refused to publish his other major work on light and optics until Hooke was dead. And rumor has it, when Newton eventually became the president of the Royal Society after Hooke passed away, the only existing portrait of Hooke mysteriously went missing. To this day, nobody knows what Robert Hooke looked like because Newton likely burned his picture. Talk about holding a grudge. But if you think his rivalry with Hooke was intense, wait until you hear about what he was doing in his basement. Because while the public saw Newton as the ultimate voice of logic and reason, his private life was basically a fantasy novel. Newton spent more than 25 years secretly practicing alchemy. He was obsessed with finding the philosopher's stone, a mythical substance that could supposedly turn cheap metals into solid gold and grant eternal life. He had a secret laboratory where he would spend days and nights standing over boiling cauldrons of toxic chemicals. He was constantly tasting his own experiments, breathing in heavy metals, and handling dangerous substances with his bare hands. Modern scientists actually tested a lock of Newton's hair and found massive, highly dangerous levels of mercury in his system. This severe mercury poisoning perfectly explains why, later in life, he suffered a massive nervous breakdown. He became incredibly paranoid, suffered from insomnia, and wrote bizarre, accusatory letters to his few remaining friends, claiming they were trying to ruin him. The man who defined gravity was slowly losing his grip on reality, poisoning his own brain in the pursuit of magic. Eventually, Newton needed a change of scenery. He was exhausted from academic life, so his friends in the government got him a job. He was appointed as the warden, and later the master, of the Royal Mint in London. Now, this was supposed to be a cushy, relaxing retirement job. You just sit behind a desk, sign a few papers, and collect a massive paycheck. But remember who we are talking about. Newton did not know how to relax. At that time, England was facing a massive economic crisis. Counterfeiters were making fake coins, and it was getting so bad that the entire currency system was on the verge of collapsing. The worst offender was a master criminal named William Challoner. Challoner was a smooth-talking, wealthy fraudster who actually had the nerve to mock the government and write pamphlets criticizing the Royal Mint. He thought he was untouchable. He severely underestimated the quiet, paranoid genius sitting in the master's chair. Newton decided to treat the counterfeiters the same way he treated a complex physics problem. He was going to completely dismantle them. He abandoned his fancy office and went deep undercover. He disguised himself and walked into the darkest, most dangerous taverns and alleyways in London. He became a ruthless investigator, building a massive network of informants and spies. He bribed people, he threatened criminals, and he gathered an unbelievable amount of evidence. He cornered William Challoner and dragged him into court. Challoner tried everything to escape. He faked madness, he threw tantrums, and he begged for mercy. But Newton sat there, completely stone-faced, watching his enemy fall apart. Thanks to Newton's overwhelming evidence, Challoner was found guilty and met his end on the gallows. Newton practically saved the British economy, acting as a 17th-century superhero who traded his cape for a pocketbook of legal warrants. Looking back at his life, Isaac Newton passed away at the age of 84. He died having never married, completely dedicated to his strange, brilliant, and chaotic obsessions. He was a man of extreme contradictions. He possessed the most logical mind in human history, yet he believed in magical stones. He was desperate for validation, yet terrified of criticism. He gave us the tools to reach the stars, but he spent his life fighting petty battles with his rivals and hunting down criminals in the mud of London. Perhaps the greatest lesson we can learn from Sir Isaac Newton is not just about gravity or calculus. It is that perfection is a myth. You can be the smartest person to ever walk the earth and still be deeply flawed, petty, and weird. Sometimes, the drive to prove everyone else wrong is the exact push you need to change the world. Thank you so much for tuning in to BrainBoost English Podcast. If you enjoyed this wild ride through history, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs a little dose of crazy history today. Leave a comment below telling us which historical figure you want us to expose next. Until then, keep questioning everything, and I will see you in the next episode.